Hey, this is Talk Gnosis, the web's premier web talk show. A lot of web internet talk show about all of your favorite topics, all my favorite topics like Gnosticism, Gnosis, mysticism, ancient religions, paganism, witchcraft, magic, meditation, creativity, art, theater, witches, missing witches, and anything else we feel like talking about. I'm Deacon Jonathan Stewart. Joining me tonight is special guest host Jason. Hi, Jason. How's it going?
Not too bad. Not too bad. Exciting to be here.
Yes. Glad you're back as always. Obviously, we'd like to have our regular co-host, Lainey Peterson, but we mix it up with about half the Gnostics in the world coming on as co-hosts. But very exciting to have you here, Jason. I think particularly with our guests tonight, there's going to be a lot to connect to and to talk about. And our guest tonight, the king of the segues. I just did it. We have the hosts and creatrices and writers and everything else behind the Missing Witches podcast project, Risa and Amy. Hello. Say hello and just give us a quick whatever you're about. Not the project yet, but just you, Risa and Amy.
Hi, Jonathan. It's nice to see your face and hear your voice. I'm so excited to be on a show. It's such a laser-like focus. Just really honed it in on Gnosticism and all good things. I've known Jonathan for a really long time, long before Missing Witches. I'm the co-creator of Missing Witches with Amy Twarak. We write and met making music and realized we both made shit happen and were interested in magic and wanted to talk about it. And we just were sort of like feminist historians without realizing that's what we wanted to be when we grew up, even though we were in our 40s or whatever. So, and we stumbled into that work, this sort of overlap between feminist history and magic and spirituality and sort of intersectional knowledge, like what is this stuff that's been missing, and specifically for us, like what was missing for us from the world of us, like we went looking for what we needed, and that was sort of the birth of the project. And that's not what you asked for at all. You just want to know about me, but I'm just like a human in a house. I have a kid. I'm tired. I don't know. I'm fine. It's COVID era. Everything's fucked up.
I hear that. Amy, similar?
Pretty much everybody I know is breaking down right now, so we'll start there with the how are yous. Like, good enough considering the times. It's all relative, right? But just for your listeners at home, you're not the only one. Everybody is breaking down right now. It's cool. Just let it out. Just have a good cry, or a good laugh. Laughing and crying. It's the same release, like Joni Mitchell said. Speaking of Joni Mitchell, that's kind of, I fancy myself in an ideal world somewhere sort of halfway between Joni Mitchell and John Waters, sort of like a counterculture enthusiast, which obviously has a lot of overlap with being a witch enthusiast. We are some of the original outcasts. And I'm into outcasts. Bring them to my house.
Fantastic. Yeah, and to talk about breakdowns, like, to be fair, of course, with COVID, it's pretty hard times for just about everybody. Also, if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, I usually have a breakdown and go crazy around this time of the year. Anyways, it's December 2nd. If you're particularly where we are, to clarify, Risa and Amy and I are all in Montreal. We get like 5 hours of sunlight. Jason is even more north, further north. So it's cold, it's dark. We just biologically, our bodies want to make us sad so that we preserve energy. Sad people don't move much or burn calories. So bears, when they're ready to hibernate, they have a big cry.
I don't know if that's true, but I love it.
Yes, 100% true. Gnostic gospel truth. Okay. before we actually get into the good stuff, and Amy and Risa, I forgot to warn you about this, but we do a commercial up top at the beginning of the show, because if we don't, people are just going to be blown away by this show, right? So they're going to go listen to every Missing Witches episode. They're going to pre-order the book. They're not going to stick around to listen to the commercial. So I hate to do it, but I got to do it now. Folks, if you like what we're doing, please support us financially if you're able to by donating at patreon.com/Gnostic. You can do it for as little as $1 per piece of content per month. If we decide to do 1 million pieces of content in a month, you can also cap the amount that you're donating. If you want to do a one-time donation, you can do paypal.me/Gnostic. We 1 trillion gigzillion % understand that if you do not have any extra cash because of the hard times we've already been discussing, I am infamously perpetually broke. Take pity upon me. But you can also help us out by sharing the show, by telling people about it, by putting it on your social media, by liking and subscribing, by leaving a good review on the podcatcher of your choice. So yeah, please help us out. And for the begging for money part, we literally can't do it without viewers like you. We do have to hire a studio to do it. Money is the worst archon of them all. Okay, I'm done. Let's get into the actual good stuff. Okay, so Risa, you told us a little bit about you and Amy and about how you folks came together, but if we can go into that in more depth. So tell me about yourself and specifically your journey into witchcraft as opposed to the journey into the project, because I personally love these stories about how people come to these traditions.
Yeah, it's a good question. I was thinking about it before because you kind of gave us some of these in advance, and I don't know. I guess the best way I can describe it, we talk about it in the book, and so we did put some thought into like how we would tell the story of how we came into practicing witchcraft. And the truth of it is we were just trying to figure out rituals to process the world we were in. And for me, that has always been like this feeling that there's a much more profound connection to the natural world possible than what was available to me in academic philosophies that I was being exposed to, in the religious philosophy that I grew up in, all of which were like beautiful and armed me with a lot. But I don't know, there was nothing that was like as profound as when I was a kid, and I felt like very confident that the trees were alive and communicating to me, or that I had some sort of relationship with the wind. And so to be like very much an adult, like in my 30s or whatever, and finding these books that had been like thrown out of the Salvation Army and passed to us, and to start to find writers and thinkers who were suggesting that you could make up your own rituals and ways of communicating with the natural world and take some sense of power back in your life and your relationship with spirit, was sort of, I guess, how that journey happened for me.
Yeah. Amy?
I think I can go back to like very early childhood for a lot of us. I think when you are growing up as a little girl, you sort of, from birth, you have 2 options in a sense, that you're either the princess or the witch. And many of us are drawn to the princess, and many of us are drawn to the witch. And I think I was just, again, I always felt different and weird, and like the things that society laid out didn't necessarily make sense to me, but I knew that there were these characters who lived in houses made of candy in the woods, who lived by their own rules and didn't take the expectations of femininity or society onto their backs. And so again, like a lot of people, I think when I would go to the library as a little kid and I would find books about the European witch hunt. And everything was, from that perspective of the persecutor, the maleficarum and how to torture a witch. And it wasn't until Risa and I really started digging. And that's the thing about the project, is that it does require digging. Most of what you'll find when you start talking about witches are either the Aleister Crowleys and the Gerald Gardners or the witch hunters. So this has sort of been a lifelong process of coming out of the candy house and learning that there are other many millions of myriad ways to be a witch, and just kind of wanting to investigate all of those.
So sorry, Risa, you came across Fate, Fortune, the Goddess, the Spirits, put some books on a sidewalk for you from the Salvation Army.
Oh yeah, so that story is Amy and I had started kind of improvising some stuff with a group of women, sometimes at night in the community garden, sometimes in our houses on our porches, and we weren't really talking about it that much, but then did tell like a very straight-laced library studies friend who worked at the Salvation Army, that we were starting to practice some witchcraft, and she was like, "Oh fuck! Well, the Salvation Army throws out all books related to witchcraft, so I got a pal for you. I'll start smuggling them out for you, and you guys can have them." So she showed up with the solitary practitioner, some Ravenheart stuff, like some things that like my aunt probably had on her shelf, but I had just never gone down those paths. So to be in our 30s and be like, oh wait, and then there's this connection to this like anarchist feminist arts movement from the 60s that also identified as witches, and we started to find these histories. Like we were doing this research before we started the podcast. We were just like, who are these people? How can we find out more about them? Why does every Google search just land on the same white dudes? Like what is this practice? Who are these people?
Yeah. Okay, and can both of you sort of talk to us about your definition and understanding of what being a witch is and what witchcraft is? This is a question that my fingers were on fire as I was writing it, because it's really something I really want to hear you folks talk about. And Amy already sort of touched on it, of all the different ways of being a witch. But if you can kind of, put out some thoughts on this topic.
Yeah, that's really the thrust of it for me, is that every time I meet a witch, and now, we interview witches all the time. So I've met witches from all over the world at this point, at least in these types of conversations. And we always say, like, we gather perspectives one at a time, because we find that every single person that we talk to has a different definition of what a witch is, what they are when they're a witch, what the practice is. So my definition is, again, it's one of the few labels that I take on, because it's so nebulous, because it's so unlabely. You can say the word and you still don't really know what it means. And in fact, I think in medicine, the word occult can be used to describe, correct me if I'm wrong, like a disease or a process that doesn't show, like, what are the words that I'm looking for? That you don't see right away the cause and effect, I guess and this is a medical term, occult. And I think, that's a witch to me at the broadest level, whether you're like barefoot in a sunflower field or you're in a basement with your knives and blood rituals and whatever you take, you are recognizing the unrecognizable, seeing what's not there, whether it's just like, again, like my growing up trying to understand the rules of society and them never really synthesizing, like never really being able to get comfortable with the rules of society. Again, I think that's why there's such an overlap between the queer population and the witch population, the punk rock population and the witch population. So yeah, a witch.
And activists.
Yeah, activists, artists, like to us, Risa and I always say we cast a very broad net when we use the term witch. But yeah, to me, it's just somebody who sees something more than what is presented to them. How about that? Yeah. That makes sense?
Amazing. I love it. Before I barrel on, do you have anything to add to that, Risa?
Yeah, I mean, yeah and no, that's fucking perfect. And sorry I swear so much. We didn't talk about it beforehand. Am I allowed to swear on your show?
It's too late now.
It's really way too late. I'm so sorry.
We've already segued into that rating now.
Cool.
So
Yeah.
Cool. So we're there. Great. Yeah. No, it's really so much of what Amy said is so accurate to how I feel. It's believing in the world beyond the built world, and I think that's why for me I wanted to jump in with that connection to activism, because I really need to believe that there are potential lives and hopes and like comforts and dignities for myself and all beings beyond this current built world, because I don't want to believe that this one is it. I think that we construct the world with our magic, and that everything we do is magic, and nothing is mundane, and our words and actions create the world. And I want to believe and empower myself to believe in this hope that I have, that we can live something more beautiful and more unified with other beings. So
preach, sister.
And certainly when you have an intention, then whatever you're doing becomes the witchcraft, right? Like you can sweep the floor, or the sweeping of the floor can be like a prominent ritual in your life of cleansing. And it just depends on how you set your intention and what your perspective is, which is, again, is so great for me. I'm like not super into rules and dogma. So I like that, like everything, you bring your perspective to everything.
Yeah. Jason, sorry, you're about to do it. I was going to say, before I barrel on, they just spat fire, and I know that you have some thoughts about what they said. So
yeah, no, I'm jamming on a lot of that stuff. I like that idea of the occult or witchcraft being like a lens shift, and not not like a special thing that you have to go somewhere and do only in a sealed off way. Like I really like that idea that it can happen anywhere if you let it. And there was also something there that I really kind of jammed on with that idea of like connecting to something that can't be defined. Like a big thing in Gnosticism is the idea of the ineffable, like this source that we're almost acknowledging up front that we don't have the words for. Mm-hmm. And so there's something about what you're talking about that feels like it's in that similar vein of pushing in that direction. This isn't really even a question. I'm kind of meandering my way to a question here. But like about living in that exploratory mode. Does that jive with what I'm hearing?
I'm nodding furiously. I don't know. Yeah, I'm nodding furiously for sure.
Thank you to our podcast listeners there. She's nodding furiously.
Yeah.
I love those questions that are like, here are 7 thoughts I had while you were talking. Now you talk again. That's how I do podcasts.
There is also something that like it's a conversation that like even John and I have had in some of our own groups, has been like around the notion that like society, like a lot of what we call normal society, is still itself, like, without getting too what's the word here? I guess wishy-washy in my statement, is still basically a bunch of agreements that people have made with each other. And there's no there's no atomic structure to capitalism. You know what I mean? Like there's nothing. That's just a series of agreements we're making, and just like a lot of what I'm hearing, what you guys are talking about. Again, I'm just riffing here because I'm enjoying it so much that there's like that by introducing new things to that weave, that that they can shift what that global social agreement is.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting completely. That we've been living like this way. I don't know the exact numbers, but let's say we've had electricity for 100 years. Yeah. Can you imagine your life without electricity? Like I can't, but that's like 100 years. But if you talk about like African Yoruba Ifa, this is 15,000 years of oral tradition that's been passed down, but a research that was never documented in a satisfying to patriarchy kind of way. So yeah, I think, again, this sort of expansion of the idea of knowledge, being okay with not knowing, like you said, the ineffable, I think that's definitely a part of witchcraft that is counter to capitalism, that is counter to patriarchy, where the need to control exists so much. Like witches, we might want to affect We want to have a positive effect. But I think most witches will tell you they're not seeking control because we recognize that this is illusion, you know, right?
Yeah. Ooh, yeah.
Okay, well, obviously we can stay in this discussion for until our producer, falls asleep and closes the connection. But very important question: what is the Missing Witches Project?
Yeah, we could talk about that. Sure. Yeah. Circle back.
Yeah. I'll take that.
Yeah.
I think
good question. Good question.
Our tagline is we go looking for the witches we've been missing. And that's pretty much what we do. So we go into history books and we go into, archaeomythology, and we look in those places for quote unquote historical witches. But we also look to our peers, contemporary witches who are practicing in new and technological ways, who are really changing our ideas. That we came upon the term techno-pagan in our first season, and that was really thrilling for both Risa and I, who are both really technological. We love technology, we're into it, but we also love a bonfire and a tree. So it was really interesting to find these people who sort of were, again, living outside of that stereotypical witch, but also well within our vast definition. So the project is basically, it started as a podcast where we would tell stories and also interview witches. And now the podcast has been turned into a book, which is coming out next year. So yeah, it's kind of also one of my favorite Missing Witches events was the one that we did with you, where we got to take over the pulpit of a church and bathe in the stained glass while we told these witch stories. I mean, again, that's one of my favorite memories. So yeah, the project started as learning and sharing stories, and now it's become this multimedia thing. We were very surprised that there were as many people as interested in what we had to say as there turned out to be.
Yeah. Also, for the folks at home, the I don't know if you lecture, performance, ritual spell that Risa and Amy did for the AJC was for our conclave in Montreal in 2018, and it is recorded. I believe you folks put it out as a recording or a podcast, so I'll link that up in the show notes because it really is something special, and I hope you all check that out. You mentioned a book. Tell us all about it and what it is and what genre book is it? Is it a book of spells? Is it a book of biographies? Is it a book of mystical images? Tell us all about it and how we can pre-order it.
The answer is yes, yes, and yes. Maybe Risa, you want to expand on my
yeses? All those things. That's a great question. Yeah, it's all those things. Yeah, sure. Yeah, so this is funny witch moment too. We had written quite a lot of stories by the time we started thinking about maybe they would make sense as a book. And there is a sort of secret, not so secret Facebook group that I can't talk about, but it's for women writers, and I posted in there that we had a feminist occult history podcast, and we had written all these stories and had an intersectional lens and an activist lens, and we wanted to maybe make it a book. And we had a bunch of people reply and say that they thought we should maybe self-publish. And then we had an acquisitions editor write and be like, hey, I'm an acquisitions editor for a consensus-based nonprofit arts publisher in San Francisco, and we're looking for intersectional witch histories. Do you think that we should talk? And yeah, so that was very serendipitous, and they ended up really, and I had done a spell, to be totally honest, looking for a soulmate editor and soulmate publisher, and had this moment of revelation on the podcast with Amy, realizing she was my soulmate editor, that we edited each other's work in this way that I found so profoundly satisfying, that I had found this thing that I was looking for. And then shortly thereafter, we found this publisher that we've just been so happy working with. So that's sort of a side tangent about how the book happened. but maybe a story about asking for what you need.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to add, Risa, is that like we all the time we say words or spells, and that to me is one of the greatest. Like sometimes just saying something out loud can make it happen for you. Isn't that amazing? You know, sometimes literally like typing a Facebook post can change your life. Yeah, it's amazing.
It changed our lives. My grandmother called it her thrift store magic. She always talks about exactly what she wants to find at the thrift store before she goes in, and then she finds it. She's got really solid thrift store magic. But to answer your actual question, the book is we basically pitched this exact concept, and they were really excited about it. So it's a Wheel of the Year. So we chose stories, some of which we had started to tell on the podcast, and some of which we wrote and researched new, and we kind of delved into our own lives quite a bit more than we do in the podcast. But we chose stories to take you around the 8 sort of stations of the year, the 8 turns of the moon and the sun. And then we anchor those real people's stories with rituals that we developed for people and for ourselves, really, to kind of walk around on that time of the year. And they're really based on our experience living in the woods, living in a northern climate. And so those rituals and those ways of understanding time are really, really pretty anchored in our experience. And then there is like illuminated art. Amy made like beautiful art pieces, one for each of the chapters. And there's songs in the book. We hope it's something that people will feel like they can kind of open up at any stage, open it up if, it's the winter solstice, or open it up if it's Halloween, or any time of your life that you're like, is there a pagan, is there a witch history that could anchor me into this time in my life? And we want to like kind of meet our friends on those parts of the year over and over again. We had all these great ideas too, I think, about doing live events around the wheel and some of those rituals. So maybe we'll return
in
to
the
that
future
world again soon. Hold each other's hands.
Yeah, but
the book comes out in April, I think.
March 23rd. But I do want to say, like, in terms of how March 23rd. In terms of how we structured the book, I think we had all these stories, and Risa and I were sort of like, okay, we have all these stories, and we both like sort of thought of structuring them around the Wheel of the Year, like at the same time, which was sort of another magical thing where, it sort of makes you think that the muses are trying to get something made through you, when you and your creative partner both have the same idea at the same time. It's sort of like, that's it. That's what we're doing, and same with the project. I mean, the original project was Risa's idea. But then everything else since then has just been this sort of like very symbiotic, which has been very magical feeling. It's funny when you really start working magic, and then magical things happen, and then you go, wow, man, this shit really works. Like, just like sometimes you have these moments, even the most like cynical hearted Amy is just like, wow, I can make things happen. Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Long-term fans of the show know that go ahead. Oh, I was just going to say that long-term fans of the show know that I love the sound of my own voice.
So it sounds like I'm cutting you off.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, and I hear an echo too. Here, I'll talk slower. No, yeah, you may, if you need to turn off your camera, go for it, Risa. Do what you got to do so we can keep getting that witchy information pumped over the lines. I was just stopping to say, Jason, because I love the sound of my own voice. Before I move on, anything you want to ask about the book or that project?
No, that I'm super interested in it. Like I've been like taking a quick look at like your Instagram and Twitter and stuff while you've been talking, just to kind of get like the gist of like a lot of that posting as well. And I love that the breadth of it, and the like the non-dogmaticness of it. I think like what I'm really responding to as well is just the amount of like it's exploratory. Like it feels like you're trying to meet them where they live rather than tell them where you think they should live.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, again, it comes down to like gathering perspectives one at a time and being fundamentally non-judgmental, or maybe judgmental is the wrong word, but not placing them in any kind of hierarchy where like Maria Sabina is a bigger witch than say Zora Neale Hurston, like a lot of times in life these things get made hierarchies of, and for us it's threads in a tapestry. You can't say that one thread is more important in a tapestry than any. You need all of them in order to form this larger picture. And that's, again, in the book we made sure to go all around the world. We went from Mesopotamia, Haiti, England, Sweden, from Eastern Europe to Florida. We wanted, obviously, it can't be done. You can't write the whole story of magic. You can't, because magic existed before words. Magic existed before we had ways of expressing ideas even. So you can't do it. It can't be done. But at the same time, we're not looking for like a pigeonhole, because the pigeonholes have been done. We're looking for what connects, again, like Maria Sabina to Monica Show, to not what's different about them so much, but what they have in common. And so a breath is required for something like that. Yeah.
So keeping in mind that wouldn't be asking you to choose the favorite among your children, but could you guys just point out any particular, like say like an idea or an element of practice or like a phrase, like it can, and I would even enjoy it to be something small, but so that you've uncovered through this process, like that really stands out to each of you individually? If that makes sense as a question.
I'm just going to give Risa a chance to catch up.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Amy. Good stage whisper. I think thank you also for tolerating my delay. Yeah. There's so many things that come to mind when you ask that question. One of the like really light bulb moments for me was a person that I knew in my like professional outside life wrote to me and was like, hey, I listened to your podcast. I'm a witch. I'm an Indigenous person. And I kind of started this movement called Witches in Labs. I work with scientists. I'm really interested in the overlap between science and art and craft. And so we went and interviewed their lab, and that stemmed a bunch of really exciting relationships for us and a bunch of concepts that blew our minds and made us super excited. And that's White Feather Hunter. And one of the things she said, and I think when the whole time she was talking, Amy and I were like, yeah, like, when you're like fist bumping on the podcast and you're writing down everything they say. One of the things they said was magic is inherently anti-capitalist. And I think about that all the time. And I think that that's profoundly true. I'm reading Braiding Sweetgrass right now, and she talks about how, we just sort of decided that plants can't communicate, and it made it sort of like impossible for us to see that they were communicating both through their root structures and through hormones in the air, that they're communicating like on multiple levels around us at all times. But we blotted that out, and it eliminated our ability to see those beings, really, So we're just starting to see those. And I think that intersection between witchcraft and spirituality and science for me is like really important and really exciting. And that's where my interest lies for sure.
I would love to talk a little bit more about White Feather Hunter and that crew, because a lot of times I found there was sort of like a demeaning, if you say you're a witch, people think that you're anti-science, or that you're a flake, or that you're going to try to sell them essential oils, or, whatever other nonsense. And I've had even close friends of mine who know that I'm a reasonable person, who know that I'm not dumb or gullible, think that there's something anti-logic about witchcraft. And Whitefeather was so amazing for us because she had the vocabulary for the things that we were thinking. Like, for example, Whitefeather says in her lab, they say rituals instead of methodology. They say prophecies instead of hypotheses. So you see how just by putting like, you know, the words of formal education, it's the same thing. They mean the same thing. A hypothesis is a prophecy. A methodology is a ritual. And so Whitefeather is like taking these ancient concepts of ritual and just not putting them into a lab, just showing us that this is how we make science, that witches were the first scientists, you know, picking herbs. And again, like I say, tens of thousands of years of trial and error that we just give no notice of because it took place before we invented the writing systems that we use now, or whatever, you know, or because it doesn't fit into the society building that we've done. You know, we can't think of trees and grass and mushrooms as being on our level because then we wouldn't be able to destroy them at will. You know,
You know, mowing the lawn would feel like a terrifying moral conundrum.
Yeah. And not just a moral, but like the expectations of society. I wrote about this in the book where, you know, dandelions are the first things to pop up. And they're the first source of pollen for pollinators. So when my dandelions come up, I start to feel guilty and weird because I think that my neighbors are thinking that I'm lazy by leaving them. And so I actually can, or that my dirty dandelions are going to contaminate their, you know, perfectly manicured gardens. But what I'm trying to do is like literally preserve the ecosystem of the space in which I live. But like the shame of what my neighbors might think makes me think that maybe I should destroy my own ecosystem on the land that I steward. You know, that's how powerful it is. You know, like you said before, Jason, like the laws of society are not the laws of physics, but we treat them like they are. Yeah. And that, again, is the witch is somebody who can see the difference between the laws of physics and the laws of man or the laws of people. Mm-hmm. I don't remember what the question was. I answered it, but I did philosophize for a minute there. It's got to be worth something.
I think you did it.
The thing about these questions is honestly they're lead-ins to great conversations which we provided. So
I've often told guests this is the rant show, right? Like we want people to come on and rant about this interesting stuff and to spit fire straight from their heart. So okay, next question. On that note, next question. Oh, actually I'm saying this in case I actually listen to this or edit it. I'll have to link up Wood Wide Web in the show notes. Everybody look into the Wood Wide Web to know more about Risa and Amy are talking about with how there is this living ecosystem that actually communicates with each other, right? The trees do talk. Okay, moving on. The most recent 2000s witchcraft and occult fad, and for the listeners who are not watching the YouTube version, when I said fad, I'm doing the air quotes, has proven to have some staying power. Why do you think witchcraft has become so popular, and do you think that this is a trend?
I think I do have kind of a theory about this, and I think that part of it is generational. I don't know if, I'm sure you probably remember this, where there was a moment around the like turn of the millennium where it was all about atheism. And it was all about atheism. Atheism was only thing anybody wanted to talk about. And I think that was sort of like a reaction to our parents, you know, us shirking off those. And I don't want to say Christian values, but you know what I mean when I say like the bad ones, not the not the loving ones, but the hateful ones, you know. And we wanted to push, you know, the anti-feminist, again, all of that stuff. We wanted to push all of that away. And so we said, well, screw all that. I don't believe in anything. And that was great for a couple minutes, but there's like a hollowness to not believing in anything. You know, nihilism is exhausting, as they say in The Big Lebowski. Nihilism is exhausting. And so, but also we can't just go back and like sort of pick back up on the dogma that we left behind. So now again, we're going back to before, electricity, or before the internet, before Jesus, before Buddha, before Mohammed. And we're looking for something that will connect us to the earth that honestly we have been somewhat deliberately alienated from in modern society. And, we used to say hiking, and now people say like nature bathing, because it's a completely different thing. It used to just be you take a walk, and now it's like you have to make a conscious decision to go and expose yourself to nature, which again hasn't been the case for most of humanity, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to skip ahead to this question just in case we run low on time, because I know it's one that that a lot of our guests like, and that Jason also really likes. So both me and Jason, we have theater backgrounds. Like Jason is a full-time theater professional, and we like to talk on the show. Both me and the other guest hosts, we like to talk about the connections we see between creativity, art, and the occult. Do you see any connections between art and witchcraft?
Yeah, I'm doing my little dance. For those of you who are listening without watching, I'm doing the dance that I like to do when I really get hot about something. Yeah, to me, like, Buffy St. Marie. If you haven't heard of her, she's a one of my favorites. Oh, I'm wearing a Buffy St. Marie shirt right now. For those of you watching on YouTube, there's her unlicensed likeness. The shirt is licensed though, so I don't know if you have to blur it out or not. Anyway, she said that her spirituality is her creativity. To her, if we believe in a creator, then creativity is what we're supposed to be doing. If we were created by a creator, then we are creative. And it is almost our duty to enact that. And again, I think an artist and a witch, there's so much overlap. We take things and then we make a third thing. We take an A and a B and we make a C. And that's, and theater is the greatest ritual of all, right? We practice and we practice and we practice, and then we do it. And we've made something. We've created a universe in a shitty little room somewhere in a basement. We have created a universe. And same thing with a painting. If you make a painting, you made something that didn't exist before. I mean, what could be more magical than that? And again, we talk about this, the protest magic being very closely related to theater magic. One of my girlfriends, who's one of the people who thinks that I'm a bit soft in the head for being a quote unquote witch. She's basically Vulcan. She's like logic only. That's it, right? But she will tell me that the closest that she's come to a religious experience is concerts. Going to a concert, seeing a really amazing band. That's how she relates to our notion of magical awe. Because it's the closest that she's ever had to that religious experience that we witches get to have every day. But yeah, I mean, definitely, I think when you're making something, you're doing witchcraft. Point final, I don't see a separation between those things at all. None at all. Risa, I hear you giggling. You got something for me?
Oh man, yeah. I mean, I love to talk about this. Also, because I come from a nerdy theater background, I made those worlds in those shitty rooms. I did those warm ups or whatever. My father's a playwright. I very much my experience of being able to create in the world, of being able to create a life that is profoundly magical for myself and my family, comes from a confidence that was imbued in me in theater, that I could practice something and then step into a version of myself that had power to draw people's eyes. I could make my sound bigger. I could create a moment for a room full of people that left them trembling, and that would be an emergent property of the work of many, many, many creative minds, and that emergent property had a spirit, or that you create something that is bigger than yourself that you touch in those moments. And I think that idea that a complex network or situation has an emergent property is like what we talk about when we talk about doing magic, and also what we talk about when we talk about activism and, you know, theater. My dad is like your friend, you know, like the Vulcan, like very logical, really supportive, a little weirded out by the Missing Witches project. But he gave me my first books on theater of the oppressed, you know. Those are people who believe that in ritual and performance, they change the world, you know. So yeah, I would love to hear what you guys think and talk about this art.
Sound off, Jason.
Well, I don't know. This is their episode, not just the Jason rambling episode. But interestingly, so I'm a big fan of the art or graphic novelist Alan Moore, and he has a whole thing about magic as art, and it's kind of the same thing, that like it is to him that's the highest version of magic, is creating an art of some kind. But one thing that struck me was that, like, just today, was that the notion of how, like, we often talk about in Gnosticism about Gnosis, and for me, I usually describe it as like an aha moment, like an inward breath, like, oh wow, you know, that you're connecting to something bigger and wider than yourself, and that a lot of times even a really secular, non-spiritual theater artist that's like doing the least socially active or engaged practice, like they're doing a Noel Coward comedy or like a slapstick parody or something, they want to create a moment where the audience is going to gasp, and that's an aha moment, you know. And I think that's art. That's like, so yeah, so I'm just agreeing with you, and that's maybe where I'll taper my rant so that I'll leave the thread for another day.
Okay, I'll fade in there too and say, like, to bring it to another, you know, the word vibrations has gotten a very woo-woo rap, but like that's what a guitar is. That's what a piano is. It's just, and again, taking things and mixing them together. You take one note, you take a second note, you take a third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and you make a chord out of vibrations, out of strings that are just moving back and forth. And if you're not absolutely blown away by that, then I don't know what to tell you. You know, because like I say, like people's like, oh, vibes and vibrations. And again, they think you want to sell them your essential oil, but we're all vibrating molecules, you know, and I can take some wood and some metal and this throat, and I can make an entire room full of people burst into tears. Give me 3 minutes. Like if that's not magic. I can do that too,
but
in a different way, maybe.
Probably, yeah, different way. Yeah.
But again, like
she truly can.
Yeah, but that to me is like, again, like you were saying, Jason, like one of the highest forms of magic is to be able to transform a room, like when you're performing or as a group. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I'm in the very privileged position of getting to explain to a 2-year-old about how colors work. And that's been quite a joy. Getting to explain to a 2-year-old about anything, but like she'll point at jellyfish and be like, what's in the middle? Or like she'll ask you, you know, about how where is light coming from? Or like, why is that color different from that color? You know, like it grounds you very deeply in the profound magic of the world and how little we know and how powerful it all is.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we're almost at our cutoff time, and I think that's actually a pretty great place to wrap up. A pretty powerful ending statement from Risa. So before we go, I will, as I said, everybody tunes out. They're no longer listening, but I'll do a commercial that nobody will catch. I'm also trained in secular meditation. I used to teach it for money. Now I do it for free. Such a better deal. You can partake in these meditation sessions every Sunday morning at 11 a.m. Montreal time. That's Eastern time. Same thing as, say, New York. At milelandmeditation.substack.com. We do it over Google Meet. It's good for both people who are experienced meditators and newbies. As I said, it's secular, it's open, and it's a great thing to be doing while you're stuck in the house during this COVID COVID winter. Jason and Amy, did you folks have want to put in any plugs before we sign off?
I have a plug for the universe only. I just wanted to say one last thing that my father-in-law was joking with me one time, and he said, I don't believe in witches. And I said, that's okay. We exist whether you believe in us or not. And I want to make the same claim about magic, that you don't have to believe in it. It exists whether you believe in it or not. So you may as well just reach into the theater of the absurd and ride. That's my plug to the universe. Also, missingwitches.com, book available March 23rd. You can listen to our podcast or pre-order our book, or you can get Missing Witches merchandise at TeePublic. Ding! I did have one.
Awesome.
3, actually. Yeah.
I think my only plug is really to just keep going with that and say that, like, I want the Missing Witches to add more to the social weave, so that it so that changes, and that we're living more in a Missing Witches world than the world we've been living in so far.
Perfect plug. Okay, folks, it's unfortunately time to sign off. As always, this is always something I say at the end of the show, but it's always true. We could go all night. We've only scratched the surface. So, Risa and Amy, you'll have to come back sometime. It's been amazing. And to all you watchers, listeners, the Gnostic elite out there, thank you so much for joining us on our journey. Good night. Farewell. So long. Take care of yourselves. We love you.
Good night.